Well, welcome everyone to the second annual European Open Source Awards ceremony. I hope you've already enjoyed the welcome drink in this amazing venue, which is the Bibliothèque Solvay, truly a jewel in Brussels' Art Nouveau architecture. This building, in fact, this entire park, was constructed at the turn of the last century as a hub for scientific inquiry, and many of the greatest minds have walked these paths as part of the legendary Solvay conferences, and they include Marie Curie, Niels Bohr, and Albert Einstein. So, no pressure, folks. But it is fitting that we gather here tonight in a place dedicated to collaborative inquiry, to celebrate the open source community and your role in collective innovation. My name is James Cantor, and it's my privilege to be welcoming you and emceeing this evening. I'm a former EU correspondent for the New York Times, and I host the popular politics podcast, EU Scream. You can listen to us for progressive and factful voices on the EU. As you know, we're here this evening to focus on open source excellence. Excellence as in the best of what Europe's open source technical community can achieve, but also excellence showing how the open source community helps meet the challenges we face as a continent. Open source, of course, it already plays a huge role in Europe's software and hardware supply chains. But there are questions about what happens next. For example, can the wonderful maintainers of these systems, often volunteers, be more adequately supported, including by Europe? Public recognition of open source is important. And secondly, can Europe leverage open source at this geopolitically delicate time to build genuine alternatives to US and China, and to help make Europe's ambitions for digital sovereignty a reality? This evening, we should get plenty of inspiration and insight into those questions and many more. So let's get into it. After some introductory remarks from Daniel Stenberg, the president of the European Open Source Academy, and following that, remarks from Johan Lineker of the Research Institutes of Sweden, I'll be chatting with Thibaut Kleiner from the European Commission. We'll then move on to the Special Recognition Awards and to the presentation of the prize for excellence in open source. There will also be a European open source success story, a fair amount of multimedia about what's new, and also, along the way, an old-school string quartet. I'll also add that the Wi-Fi is open, no password needed, and I'd like to encourage you to share what we're talking about this evening on social media. The hashtag is EOS Awards 2026. We're going to hear very shortly from Daniel, as promised, but first, let's start with a video on the European Open Source Academy. Everyone, do please have a wonderful evening, and now let's roll the film.
You are cordially invited to the biggest night of open source excellence in Europe. Behind us, a year of collaboration, establishment of the European Open Source Academy, and connecting the dots across the European open source landscape. Developers, policy advocates, educators, researchers, leaders, those new to open source and those who helped build it from day one. You built what millions rely on. Tonight we celebrate all of you, the second European Open Source Awards, because your contribution deserves the spotlight. 5 award categories. Let's celebrate all open source can do for the future of Europe.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Stenberg, and it is in my capacity as president of the European Open Source Academy that I speak to you tonight. It is my privilege to hold this role again alongside my work as the maintainer of the curl project. A year ago, I stood not on this stage, but a very similar one, and I received an award I never expected. I didn't build curl for recognition. I built it to solve a problem. Then I shared it to others so they could use it, improve it, and build on top of it. That's what we do in open source. We solve problems, we share solutions, and we make things together. When I accepted the role as president of the European Open Source Academy after that ceremony, I did so because I saw the opportunity to turn public recognition into action to get people like me on board. In its first year, we haven't been sitting idle. We have launched our magazine, available this week, to spotlight the real projects and real people building Europe's digital infrastructure. We wrote editorials and gave input to policymakers explaining how open source isn't some abstract concept. It's the code running in their phones, their servers, their critical systems. We've also created a sustainable foundation for future action, helping to set up structures for involving experts in our enterprise. Going forward, our goal remains focused on public recognition, supporting open source communities and businesses to do the work they do, advocating for maintainers, contributors, and advocates for open source, and pushing for policies that recognize open source as what it truly is: essential infrastructure that deserves investment, not just gratitude. Tonight's awards are the signature activity of the Academy. They aren't just handing out medals or trophies. They're about recognizing the people who do the work no one sees, that keeps the internet and the most digital services and infrastructure running. The maintainers who review pull requests at midnight, the tireless open source advocates who pull long days to share their passion for open source. On our well-trodden conference circuit, the communities that transform individual effort into collective infrastructure, working against the big tide of big tech and corporate capture. Europe may not have a Silicon Valley, but we have something better: a robust open source workforce, a talent pool like no other, and a collaborative and values-driven model for building and regulating technology that serves people, not shareholders. We are, I hope, a region where the promise is that code be transparent, not locked away, where innovation happens in the open, available to anyone who wants to build with it. We hope this can be one of Europe's great contributions to our digital lives. The people we're honoring tonight embody the open source ethos and collaboration model. We hope you will join me in celebrating their work, and then we can have more drinks together and get back to work tomorrow. Oh, okay, Monday, maybe. There's a open source week in FOSDEM this weekend. But okay, thank you for joining us in Brussels in this January cold, even though it's much colder in Sweden. We appreciate your presence here, and enjoy the evening. Thank you. And I believe Johan from RISE is going to continue and say some good words, and Sachiko, yes, thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Academy President Daniel Stenberg. Esteemed Academy members, ladies and gentlemen, as has been indicated, we're here for a night of celebration. A celebration of open source technologies, its communities, and the tremendous impact and value that they contribute to Europe, Europe's societies, our digital infrastructure, our digital commons. Me and Sachiko, we're here representing a much larger group of partners and supporters, helping and working together with the Academy members in raising the public recognition of open source across Europe, and also helping to put on the show tonight. And we are beyond excited to have every one of you here joining us in these festivities. It's been a year now since the launch of the Academy and the first inaugural awards. A lot of things has happened. The world is spinning. Tensions are growing across Europe, across the world. So also the need for open source to act as a bridge and as a boundary spanner. Open source empowers its users with freedom and agency of their digital futures. At the same time, open source connects the same, enabling collaboration at the core, while still offering or being open for differences of opinions at the edges. By bridging societies and organizations and communities, open source brings us closer together, enabling us to progress together in a world that is actually trying to pull us more apart. But this progression is really dependent on the crafters and artisans representing the open source communities. They are the ones that spend their nights and evenings, days, weekends, contributing and investing in these open source commons. And these are the bridge builders that we're here tonight to celebrate with the support and recognition of the European Commission.
We were given 2 minutes, and I think we're already out. Goes pretty quick, 2 minutes. At last year's awards, I think I made the comment that open source had made taken a step from the back room to the ballroom. And I think that over the last 12 months, for reasons that Johan just described, we have taken an even bigger step, and that's, I would say, into the mainstream. And so I think that, yeah, actually, the comment about going from the back room to the ballroom got some traction, so I'm not sure that the mainstream comment is going to get the same traction, but in any case. The conversation now about digital sovereignty, it means that open source is of higher interest and of the interest of more people than ever before. And I think that for some of you, mostly open source people, but some policy people, you know that you're already thinking that the conversation is going to move on. The political conversation moves on, but institutions remain. And so I think this is the reason why I want to again draw the attention to the Academy, which is being created under this project and which is meant as this kind of lighthouse and a sort of as a persistent structure that can serve as a center of excellence and knowledge to promote open source. So I want to welcome all of you to not just to the awards tonight, but if you share our passion and our vision, that you will contribute to the sustainability of the European Open Source Academy and the awards. And so I think we were out of time a long time ago. I'll just be handing back now to James Cantor, who is an old friend, and we're very privileged to have him here today. I think it's a kind of also a mark of how we have gone to open source has sort of entered the mainstream political discussion. So I'm very happy to do that. Welcome and enjoy the rest of the open source week.
Thanks so much, Daniel, Johan, and Sashiko for your kind words. Now it's time for our fireside chat. And for that, I'd like to welcome the Director for Policy, Strategy, and Outreach at DG Connect at the European Commission, Thibaut Kleiner. And Thibaut, if you'd like to join me. Super. You know, I think that's the first time I've had a musical introduction. Must happen to you all the time.
By the way, I'm director for Future Networks.
Okay. Thanks for correcting. Thibaut, I do appreciate your joining us tonight. And you are here at a ceremony celebrating open source excellence. These award winners, they do represent the best of what Europe's technical community can achieve. What very broadly are your hopes and expectations for open source in the coming years?
So the reason why the European Commission decided also to create these awards some years ago, and we are funding this through a so-called support action, is precisely because we felt that open source sometimes is taken for granted by some very large technology and software providers that actually use for 80% of their products open source, but because they put a layer of proprietary software on top, they make all the money from it. But also we have sometimes an issue that there is in the boards or in the C-levels, the CIO, some lack of consideration for open source as really the solution for their problems. They prefer sometimes to stick with the large providers because they have like the corporate language that maybe is more fitting. There is maybe more of a call center that can help, and it's reassuring to just buy from Microsoft, so to say, you know. And maybe that's something we need to change also in terms of the perception of open source. I think that the code can be beautiful, it can be a form of art, but increasingly what we are trying to say in the Commission is that open source can become a real industry, a place where actually you invest because it's bringing to you key assets, and sovereignty is one of them. You know, if you know the code, if you know the technology, it means you are free somehow.
It's so interesting what Daniel said about innovation in the open and how that can work to everyone's benefit. Now, true, the European Commission has begun taking a more proactive stance on open source, and we've seen this with the Cyber Resilience Act and various funding initiatives, and you mentioned some of those, including the upcoming Open Internet Stack. So it does indeed seem like the Commission is taking open source more seriously, recognizing it in a bigger way. But in even more concrete terms, and this is such a Brussels question, isn't it? How much money is allocated to open source through the Open Internet Stack and other programs?
So indeed, sometimes, you know, people see the European Commission as a fund provider, and we are happy to do that because we try to stimulate ecosystems. Right now, we have an open consultation until the 3rd of February. So if you have not already contributed, now is the opportunity to tell us what should be our strategy on open source. That's something that we are preparing. We want to make open source really centerpiece for our sovereignty package that will come up around Easter. And really, we want to make sure that we have the right measures. And one of them is also about how you fund open source. Because sometimes I hear people telling me, great, open source is for free. Not at all. Open source actually is not for free, and we need to say it and repeat it, because people who are spending their time and their evenings on improving, correcting the bugs, developing the codes and the solutions, at the end of the day, they need to be remunerated for this effort, and we need to collectively recognize this. And so in Europe, we've put all together, I made the efforts to look at all we have funded. It's actually 800 million euros in the past 7 years going to open source. The problem is that we did it in a very scattered manner. Nobody knows. We supported the codes, but we didn't do it in a structured manner. So now the challenge is, let's try to spend this money in a more efficient manner, in a way that will bring not only codes that are scattered around, but codes that will trigger down into products, into sovereignty, into exchanges.
And that sort of brings us to the open software strategy, doesn't it? Maybe you can speak to that and what that looks like for those of us who are not already completely familiar with it.
So I would say that our open source strategy, what we have in mind is essentially to indeed structure better this funding stream. We've had in the past years something that we call the next generation internet. There the philosophy was to support communities through agile funding, so sometimes grants that were as little as a few thousand euros. We need to find new ways to fund communities in the future to make sure that the public good that is represented through open source and is preserved. But we also need now to move to what is happening in our economy. AI is everywhere, softwareization is everywhere, so we need more targeted areas where we build, in a way, new foundations for this transformation.
Super. Now, it was mentioned, I think, both by Sachiko and Johan, we are in very exceptional times. And let's just dive a bit deeper, if we can, into the geopolitics of software. Is there a bit more that you can say, Thibaut, about how open source can help with Europe's present geopolitical dilemmas of being caught between the US, which is doubling down on state capitalism, and China, which imposes authoritarian control over digital policy? It's often said that Europe can navigate a middle way. To what degree is open source part of that?
So I would say there are at least two levels. The first one is that in Europe, we have certain values. We believe that technology is not actually neutral, but the way you design technology has an impact on how it is affecting you as a person. Is it going to help your privacy, or is it going to undermine it? Is it going to preserve dignity? Is it going to have security at the heart of it, or not? With open source, because it's transparent, you can actually check what the technology is doing. So that's why we have in our regulation, in our legislation, promoted in general open source as a way to achieve the policy goals that we have in our regulation. But today, I think the focus is not anymore as much on values and what Europe stands for in general. It's about our dependencies. And we see, especially in today's world, that dependencies have become almost weaponized. If you are depending on technology from the US or China, suddenly you are weaker in terms of your trade discussions. You are weaker in terms of what you can impose to your partner somehow. And that's what we think open source can solve. We can leapfrog because we work together. We can, cover these gaps we have in our technology stack, and we can actually enhance the open source communities to bring new innovation in Europe for the purpose precisely of being more sovereign and secure.
Fantastic. And the real question here, though, is, and one just has to read some of the more cynical takes on this, but let me ask you this. Can open models and open infrastructure, will it really help Europe build those genuine alternatives to the US hyperscalers and to Chinese AI? Or are we kind of kidding ourselves?
I mean, you'd be surprised because what I found in the past years, and I've been only 9 months in this job, is that there already are alternatives. There are already, as a result of all these efforts, very decent products in terms of software, open source based. It's just that they are not promoted, they are not used by large communities because people don't know about them. So I think a first focus is to value and make aware users that you have actually alternatives already today. And that's something that we are working also in the Commission. Very interesting discussion with my colleagues from the IT department. I'm trying to convince them that, we should experiment maybe, not just use the same tools. And actually, they start moving this way. So as part of our open source strategy, there will be also an important contribution to show how the Commission can actually show the way forward. So that's the first thing. Use what already exists as alternatives. And secondly, as I was saying before, cover the gaps, cover the blocks by using open source as a way to rapidly have technological solutions that we miss and that we are depending today from.
And let me just circle back with some of the brief time that we have left. You said that 800 billion had been spent over the last 7 years. To what degree can we predict what that package is going to look like over when we put together the next big 7-year budget for the European Union? This thing is called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, and there are big negotiations for it between member states. So it's a tough question.
No, it's tough because this is probably the biggest and the most difficult conversation these days, how much the budget will be. Will the Commission be able to secure these innovative approaches where we put actually more money on innovation, on the sovereignty aspects, instead of more traditional areas like agriculture or other priorities that are important, but maybe not as important as building your technological future. So I cannot predict what may happen. What I can tell you is that this week, the EU Open Source Week is very refreshing. I've never heard policymakers speaking so much about open source, and I think we need collectively to seize the moment, to also raise our voice and explain to politicians that investing in open source is, getting your money back 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So let's encourage this in the future.
Well, that's just about all the time that we have for this fireside chat. And it's fantastic that you got a round of applause there, Thibaut. So that's the perfect place to leave it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Big round of applause. Okay, so thanks again, Thibaut. That was great fun to do that, and thanks for making the time for it. And now it's time to start handing out the special recognition awards. After all, we are here to honor the different aspects of your contributions to Europe's open source ecosystem. And to get this part of the show on the road, it's my pleasure to invite on stage Amandine Lepape, the head of the Business and Impact section at the European Open Source Academy. Amandine, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So yes, my name is Amandine Lepape. I'm the co-founder of Matrix, the open standard for secure and sovereign collaboration. Also COO at Element, one of the Matrix vendors, and I'm also the head of Business and Impact section at the European Open Source Academy. I'm very happy to be here tonight to present our first special recognition of the night, the special recognition for business and impact. This award, the second Business and Impact Award that was given away by the European Open Source Academy, will be presented to one of my peers who has excelled in building an open source business and driving impact through innovation. In particular, with this award, we aim to recognize a key individual who has been advancing the conditions for entrepreneurship and a sustainable business ecosystem around open source software and hardware, inspiring other business leaders in the process. The award celebrates how much this person has increased the impact of open source for the society and economy of Europe, but also the world at large. As in its name, what we've been really looking for when selecting the recipient is someone who has been demonstrating and amplifying both the business value and the societal impact of open source. So not only someone who has been able to build a strong open source business, but who also has managed to do so whilst promoting the key value of openness and collaboration, and whose impact on the open source ecosystem goes much wider than a successful company. So tonight, I'm delighted to hand this special recognition for business and impact to Frank Karliczek, founder and CEO of Nextcloud. So Frank has been hands-on in open source for more than 30 years, but his biggest achievement has been to grow Nextcloud into the go-to open source content collaboration platform in Europe. From file management, calendaring, contacts, and more, Nextcloud aims to be the hub where organizations collaborate. Celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year, Nextcloud has a stronghold in the market for digitally sovereign content management from ministries in Germany, France, and Austria, cities like Geneva, universities, middle schools, and even prominent private companies. One of Frank's key focuses when he founded Nextcloud as a follow-up of his previous business has been to maintain the openness and collaborative spirit, keeping a strong emphasis on the community and retaining a liberal license on the software. This has been key to turning his users into real advocates, then customers. It has been associated with a business model centered around support and hosting, integrations, plugins, but also very strong partnerships across the ecosystem. Frank turned the business into a real success story, which flies the open source flag high and proud. Anyone looking to start an open source business can take inspiration from Frank, who has managed to focus on his community whilst growing the profitable company and supporting the ecosystem. So I hope he managed to take a breath because he just arrived. Congratulations, Frank, and please come on stage to collect your award.
Yeah, thanks a lot. First of all, you have no idea how happy I am to be here. Because of some crazy travel, I literally arrived 3 minutes ago. So I'm really, really happy to be here today. So yeah, thanks a lot for the amazing award. It's really an honor. But of course, I can only accept this in the name of our community, because these are the people who do the real work, the real heavy lifting. I'm just a person who is traveling around here, but the community is doing the real work. So thanks a lot. So it's funny, when I started to do open source in the 90s, my motivation was mostly that it's fun. I just like to play with technology. I try to build stuff. I find it like super fascinating. And nowadays it's still fun, of course, but nowadays we also have a higher purpose that we're doing here. So the Nextcloud community is building Nextcloud for a reason, not only for fun. Fun is good, but the reason is, of course, that we want to protect the privacy of the users. We want to protect the security. We want to have a solution which protects against espionage or mass surveillance and other things. And there's, of course, also, if you read the news, then you know there's some geopolitical tension here at the moment. There are some autocratic tendencies. And of course, Nextcloud is also a solution where everybody, every user, every citizen can be sure that their data is protected and is not misused by some big tech companies or some governments. So this is a really, really important thing. So again, as I said, it started with fun, I think for most open source developers. But I think I can say that everybody who is contributing to open source is contributing actually to a better world, to actually make sure that we have in the future, like privacy, security, no surveillance, and just basic human rights. So I think every open source developer nowadays really works for a higher purpose. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank, and congratulations again. I'm now going to hand over to Lydia Pincher for the special recognition for awareness and advocacy.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations, Frank. I'm Lydia Pincher. I'm the head of the Advocacy and Awareness section of the European Open Source Academy. Next to my work on Wikidata, Wikimedia's Knowledge Graph, and on KDE's board of directors. Today, I have the honor to present the second special recognition of the night, the special recognition for advocacy and awareness. With this award, we want to shine a light on someone who embodies the ideals of open source software and open source hardware. Tonight's awardee has spent countless hours bringing people together to widen the circle of who gets to do science, and thereby shape the whole field, the field of open science hardware. She is someone who is not only a pioneer in her own field, doing research and science, but whose commitment to science has brought her to sharing and advocating for open source hardware. In this capacity, she has spent years tirelessly advocating for open hardware and raising awareness of open source principles in the life sciences. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to announce that tonight's special recognition for advocacy and awareness has been awarded to Dr. Jenny Molloy. Jenny is an assistant research professor at the University of Cambridge and biomanufacturing group leader at the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. She is also a founding board member of the Open Science Hardware Foundation and founded the Gathering of Open Source Hardware, or GOSH for short. Jenny's work focuses on increasing access to scientific tools, especially for low middle income countries. She has been a champion of open hardware for over a decade, but most importantly, she has co-organized and shaped the foundational agenda-setting meeting series Gathering of Open Science Hardware, which helped pave the way for Open Science Hardware Foundation. GOSH brings together scientists, engineers, educators, and community technologists from around the world. Through these gatherings, Jenny has helped a fragmented set of projects recognize themselves as a field. It's hard to overstate how important this has been for such a small field. Over time, Jenny has consistently done the maybe less glamorous but sorely needed work that open science hardware communities needed and depended on, like helping put together governance structures, supporting community members to take on leadership roles, and ensuring that values like equity, accessibility, and global participation were built into how decisions are made. Her work has helped bridge grassroots open hardware practice with institutions, funders, and policymakers who are now increasingly paying attention to open science hardware as critical research infrastructure. Moreover, Jenny has gone beyond the traditional open hardware and has helped transpose the usual freedoms to use, to study, to modify, and to redistribute to the fundamental building blocks of biochemistry. It turns out that sharing DNA sequences made of A's, T's, Z's, and G's is not so straightforward, owing to the established culture and legal landscape in this area of science. Jenny and her colleagues have worked hard to overcome this extra hurdle, establishing the Open Material Transfer Agreement as a key tool in sharing material in the life sciences. So Jenny is an inspiration, and we can all learn from her enthusiasm and her ability to move a whole field forward by bringing together the right people and rallying them behind a common cause: open hardware to make science better and more accessible for and by everyone. Because everyone can be a scientist if only we give them the access to the tools. Congratulations, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Lydia, for the excellent introduction. I'm delighted to receive this special recognition for my work in open source advocacy and awareness, but I also want to acknowledge how much this work has been a collective effort. So in 3 short chapters with some intermingled thanks, my origin story is that I was interested in open source as a teenager. I installed Linux. I kind of was, from a distance, looking at this community. And I decided to organize a panel as an undergraduate in Cambridge in 2008 called Can We Open Source Everything?, which was chaired by Glyn Moody. I met Rufus Pollock and Peter Murray-Rust, who was one of our panelists, and they introduced me to the Open Knowledge Foundation. And that was really the start of all of this. And so for those of you who take the time to talk to enthusiastic but quite intimidated outsiders about open source, and have the generosity to invite them into your communities, thank you, because I wouldn't be standing here without people like you. Open science became quite rapidly mainstream, and I refocused my advocacy on the tools of the trade for science: lab instruments, DNA, and cells, in my case as a biologist. And I think Lydia did a fantastic introduction to why this matters. It impacts who can do science where, what questions they can ask, and how quickly we can accelerate discovery and application of science for the societal benefit. And 2026 marks 10 years since Shannon Dosamega and Francois Gray, Javier Serrano, and many others gathered at CERN to really bring together this open science hardware community. And we were back there last week. Thank you, Javier, for hosting us again. That meeting really kind of sort of reinforced to me that advocacy gains are small and they're iterative, but if you sum them up over 10 years, we can really see an impact in our work, and that's very validating. So we need to keep on pushing and reaching new audiences and addressing new challenges. In biology, we have some interesting questions. Breaking down what the source is here becomes quite interesting. So I'm currently working with the Reclone community on open cell lines that are critical to manufacturing vaccines and drugs like insulin. Despite being 40+ years old and patent expired, these technologies are still not in the public domain because the source is the material, and unfortunately contractual overreach has effectively generated a perpetual monopoly. So these are the types of questions we grapple with in open source in biology, and it's really why we need not only technology development, but also ongoing advocacy for legal and policy changes. And I'm very grateful for inspiring mentors like Tom Knight, Drew Endy, Fernand Federici, Linda Carl, and Jim Hasloff. So I want to end by thanking the European Open Source Academy for this honor, and also thanking the Shuttleworth Foundation and fellows. I was incredibly fortunate to, in 2018, be given belief and support and resources that many advocates and people who've also put tireless effort into this community have not had the opportunities that I've had. So I'd like to dedicate this to all advocates in the open science hardware and SIN bio communities and the broader open source space, because it's definitely been a collective effort, and we should all share in our successes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, and congratulations again. And now it is my honor to call up David Gutierrez on stage for the next special recognition. David.
This is really hard. I'm representing people that don't wear a suit. I'm really, really glad that the person getting this next special recognition is really representing this group. So I'm going to try to read this thing that I wrote, and I got corrected, and I'm really bad at reading, so please bear with me. I mean, I'm really good at reading, but not in public. Yeah. And you are not my son, so this is not a good night story. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the next segment, which is this segment, where I have the honor to hand out the Special Recognition for Skills and Education, which is an award I got last year, only that this year comes with a really beautiful medal. I should warn you right away, this speech contains a non-negligible amount of nerd talk. So if some of it flies past you, don't worry. You're in excellent company, like look to your right and to your left, obviously. And I promise you that it led somewhere worthwhile, honoring our award winner, who is a pioneer in open source hardware. Over the past years, we've witnessed a remarkable wave of digital democratization. Oh my God. Being from Spain, this word is impossible. So we've seen how software and hardware technologies have expanded in ways that were unthinkable of not long ago. With this movement, the European Open Source Academy has become committed to recognizing those who are advancing not just open source software, but also open source hardware. This year, we hope to use this award to draw attention on the once opaque world of chip design and manufacturing, and recognize a developer who we believe is leading this area from an open source perspective. With this in mind, it's my pleasure to deliver this year's Special Recognition for Skills and Education to Matt Venn, founder of Tiny Tapeout, a small organization providing services that make manufacturing ASICs affordable and accessible to students and makers. Matt, stay there, don't come yet. So let me back up and explain why Matt's work is so important. And I'm going to tell you a grandpa story, guys. So when I was a student, my own introduction to chip design happened through simulations and FPGA deployments. I spent long nights in a lab in Germany, hacking the cache system into a transistor-level implementation of the ENIAC. If you don't know what the ENIAC is, please Google it right now. None of those designs ever had a chance of becoming real silicon. It was 1995, and they only live in simulation. Even later, while I worked at Infineon, one of the largest chip manufacturers in the world, the idea that anyone outside a major semiconductor company could meaningfully participate in chip manufacturing was just impossible. Today, ASML machines can produce about 180 wafers per hour, each wafer containing hundreds or thousands of chips. Yet for most people, this world remains completely out of reach. If a student or educator wanted to fabricate even a tiny ASIC, how would they make it possible? So a few years ago, I came across Matt's course, one of the first persons taking your course, which introduced me to a radical idea, not only sharing wafers, but sharing chip space itself, allowing many small designs to coexist on a single die. In 2022, they ran an experiment packing 500 different designs into just one chip. Performance was not great, as you might expect, but it proved the concept, and it involved over 100 participants. Since then, more than 3,500 projects and over 2,000 people have made it into silicon. And as Matt has once and often pointed out to me, most of these submissions came from complete beginners in microelectronics. So using Matt's technology, thousands of people have built Z80 clones, tiny Linux-capable chips, software-defined radios, which are ideas that once require entire engineering teams and huge amounts of R&D and money. Some chips even include audiovisual demos from the demo scene, bringing creativity and silicon together in ways nobody ever predicted. So Matt's vision has been to democratize this, and that's exactly what he has accomplished with his Tiny Tapeout project over the last 5 years. Teaching people how to share this microscopic real estate has sparked a community of up to 20,000 participants across Discord, forums, and newsletters, growing at a pace that mirrors the excitement of the field itself. So Matt is committed to making this revolution about not just access, but knowledge sharing, and quite literally space sharing, microscopic space. I could not think of a more deserving winner to this award. So please, Matt, join me on stage to get your award. Put your hands in the air.
Let me just get a mic check here. I say tiny, you say tape out, tiny? 5 out of 10. So thanks very much for this special recognition for skills in education. As a child, I loved to take things apart to find out what made them tick. My grandparents would buy old clocks for me to take apart on their kitchen floor and explode them into pieces. Boing! Later, I remember saving up to buy this incredible pyramid-shaped digital clock. It could talk. I was so amazed. But when I took it apart, I had no idea how it worked. And chips remain for me literal black boxes, even as an electronic engineer designing my own circuits. I never really thought about how chips work and how they're made and who designs them, the teams involved. That all changed when I met Tim Edwards at a conference in Zurich, where he presented a microcontroller he'd made almost entirely with open source tools. So when Google announced free chip manufacture for open source designs, I jumped in with both feet and, along with some friends, designed and sent my first chips to be manufactured. And then I did it again. And then I did it again. And I think in the end, I managed about 20 free tape outs, thanks to Google paying for it, and all managed by eFabless. I still remember how amazed I was holding a tiny chip that I knew contained one of my first ever designs on it, a design that had been turned into a microscopic, three-dimensional sculpture made out of metal, silicon, and glass. I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to learn so fast, and it's been amazing to share that with all the new chip designers that are creating their first chips with Tiny Tape Out. So I want to say thanks to my family and friends for their support, Tim Edwards and Tim Ansell for helping me get started, and all the people who took my Zero to ASIC course, including David here, especially Uri, who became my co-founder at Tiny Tape Out. He and the Tiny Tape Out team turned my rough, badly performing prototype into a real product. And I also want to say thanks everyone here, thanks to the open source silicon community for being so supportive. And of course, none of the open source silicon chip design tools would be possible or exist without the tremendous commitment to free and open source software that has made incredibly niche fields like microelectronics accessible to anyone with an internet connection anywhere in the world. So here's to the next 20 chips. I can't wait to see what the next generation decides to make next.
So I'm really glad to hand the prize of like the best dressed person in the party, which is actually Astor, who's going to present the next prize. You have to see Astor choosing his tie before coming on stage. It was fantastic. So let's give a hand to Astor.
Good evening, everyone. So, open source is a vast, really, really vast ecosystem of communities. Beyond the code itself, the scale of the interconnected human networks behind it is remarkable, even beyond what many open source people really appreciate. What emerges from this humongous collective effort, open source software with all its interdependencies, it may well be the most complex human creation in our history. The only true parallel I can think of is general knowledge production, the scientific method, universities, peer review. In many ways, open source is part of that same system. Yet I believe that, despite us repeating those things, really absorbing this truth is quite difficult, just how vast and big and impactful it is. And this other way of understanding open source as a human creation, a shared body of knowledge and a cultural artifact that deserves the same care as any other form of heritage, if not more. That perspective did not come naturally to me. It emerged through conversations, and in particular one that I had early at my time at OFE, and it's OFE that brought me into the open source ecosystem. The person I was speaking to asked me a question that has really stayed with me since because of its framing. How would you design a software archive that must still function in 1,000 years? This question, and many philosophical follow-ups, reframed my understanding of software. And really why this matters. The question places open source not in the category of technology, but in the category of world heritage. And the person prompting this reflection for me was Roberto Di Cosmo. Together with Stefano Saccaroli, he is the founder of Software Heritage, and they are the recipients of this year's special recognition for community impact. What they built through Software Heritage is a direct expression of that long-term vision. Their ambition is to collect, preserve, and share all software that is publicly available in source code form, without distinction, because any component may one day prove essential. They preserve full development histories, track origins, assign intrinsic persistent identifiers, so that software can be referenced, verified, and reused across time and generations. Software Heritage is designed as an institution, not a platform. It's built on openness, replication, and long-term stewardship. All of its software is, of course, released as open source, a precondition for anything that has this long-term perspective. And its technical architecture is, of course, openly documented, so the infrastructure itself can endure. It serves heritage by safeguarding a vital part of human production, serves science by enabling reproducibility and large-scale research, and it serves industry by supporting provenance tracking, long-term archival, and software bill of materials. It really takes a lot of tenacity and perseverance, as well as true knowledge of the open source ecosystem to make this work. And anyone who knows Roberto and Zach, they know the depth of their knowledge and their commitment to the community and their drive to build something that serves the community while also being driven by it. Now celebrating their 10th year, Software Heritage have shown how vital their work is. This is not incremental innovation, it's institution building in the strongest sense of the word. And while the full impact of Software Heritage will only be realized in the centuries to come, already today it has changed how many of us think about and act for software in the service of humanity. It is the true definition of community impact, to see what they have built together. Roberto, Zach, please join me on stage to receive your medal and certificate.
As you see, this is a collective undertaking. We are two here. It's special, but it has a meaning. And this should start, right?
I think we're done.
We are done? We are already done. Well, anyway. Well, you know, software is a special object. It is the fuel of innovation, the engine of our industry. It's the pillar of modern scientific research. It's a digital fabric that binds together our digital lives. It is also invisible. Most of the people don't even notice that it exists. And those that notice that it exists sometimes forget that it doesn't come out of the blue. It's actually the result of human creativity. Actually, say we write a program. And you think about this, programming is a kind of a new technological form of knowledge. It is actually executable knowledge. It's something kind of new in the history of mankind. Our work in these past years in different capacity, because of course there was software heritage, but there are also other initiatives, like for example what we do in open science, by creating awards for researchers, by insisting on getting the software development recognized as an academic achievement the same ways as articles can be, is an effort to get the source code out of the dark and into the vision of people. Yesterday at UNESCO, we celebrated 10 years of, since the announcement of software heritage, 10 years of collaboration with UNESCO, an institution which is for culture, education, and science. When we started connecting with them, they didn't even know what software was. They couldn't understand why we were insisting that we needed to work together. Yesterday, the Director General of UNESCO, the new Director General of UNESCO, came to this event, which is a kind of big recognition how this is a cultural, precious part of our knowledge. But now, since Thibaut is here, and thank you for coming virtually to our event yesterday, let me also spot one important point. We have spoken about digital sovereignty. Right? Let me go back 25 years, 30 years ago, when open source started. The real power of open source is bringing together people from very different avenues of lives, from different countries, different culture, different values, different economy, maybe enemy countries, enemy parties, but they all drop this difference to work together on a specific project, which is of interest for all. So yesterday we tried to put forward an idea. Software heritage is an archive, but it is much more. It is an infrastructure that can provide today continuity, resilience in the face of the new geopolitical changes. But it can do it with the same values that made open source succeed, by making strategic digital sovereignty not a rival property, but a shared one. We advocate for ecumenical digital sovereignty. That is to say, a way through building the work we are doing, expanding it in mirrors around the world, to make sure everybody can be safe by working together on this infrastructure, instead of saying we against the US, against China, which are against somebody else, etc. That's true. But on this key infrastructure, we can work together. And we encourage the Commission to actually come and help us in doing this. And sorry for being too long. I mean, Stefan, I give you the floor.
So it is particularly difficult to talk after Roberto, and I realized too late that we should have decided that I was going first and he second. But let's try to bear with me for a second. So in terms of community impact, we think that our major impact for the broader free and open source community that we both come from, we have both been doing free software and open source software for decades. And so we like to think that the major contribution we are going to leave to those communities is two realizations. The first realization is that indeed software and source code is not only useful for what it makes computer do for you. It's not only functional, but it contains some knowledge, some precious knowledge that costs a lot of mental energy to produce. And we hope that the Software Heritage Initiative helps in making the broader free and open source software community realize that. And the second realization is that every time an open source developer publishes a single line of code, they're actually contributing to what is called the software commons. That tiny, teeny line of code is growing the amount of knowledge that exists in society. And at the same time, that knowledge, that commons, is actually pretty fragile. And this is in spite of the fact that free and open source licenses allow us to make many, many copies of that software, which is a great feature. But if nobody's actually doing those copies, we do risk losing part of the software commons over time. So with Software Heritage, we hope we are contributing to preserve one of the most precious digital public good out there, open source software, for current generation and for generations to come. This is why we are very happy and thrilled to accept this award, not as two of us, but also on behalf of the larger Software Heritage community and the very dedicated team behind it. Thanks a lot.
A big congratulations to all the awards winners. I heard the words advocacy, complexity, independence, the public good, creativity, security, resilience, tenacity, science, and culture. And really, the achievements and contributions are genuinely humbling. So now we're going to have a brief interlude, a musical interlude. Please glance up at the balcony where the Meraki String Quartet will be performing a song perhaps some of you will recognize. And in the meantime, if you wish, you can use the QR codes on the screens to see at what point we're at in the ceremony and to read the latest edition of the European Open Source Academy magazine. Enjoy the music. That was really wonderful. Hands up, who got it? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So it's a cover of Still Alive from the game Portal. And that was the Meraki Quartet. All right. It's now time for a European success story for open source adoption. That success story is Blender. Blender is a 3D computer graphics technology that was used among many other applications to create the movie Flow. Flow being the 2024 movie by the Latvian director Gintas Zilbalodas, and the movie that won the Academy Award last year for Best Animated Feature. It's my pleasure to now introduce onto the stage the new CEO of Blender, Francesco Sidi. Francesco.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the European Open Source Academy. I would like to thank the Academy. Now I can say it. And so this little segment is called The Story of Blender. The story of Blender is very long. We don't have that much time. But I was thinking about it, and actually, a lot of it's the same story repeating over and over and over. So actually, I will focus on a couple of things and talk about some values, some things that like make Blender what it is. And then I'd like you to imagine and extrapolate this throughout the course of many years, because that's what then it takes, a lot of tenacity and a lot of time to make a project like Blender become what it is. And let's start with let's start with a little video.
And the Oscar goes to...
Thank you to Sideshow and Janus. Thank you to Blender. Thank you to my mom and dad. Thank you to my cats and dogs. I'm really moved by the warm reception our film has had, and I hope that it will open doors to independent animation filmmakers around the world. Soon.
This is a tribute to the artists and the developers in the Blender community. I love to put together these kind of reels that actually really show the variety and the depth and the diversity of work that is possible to do with Blender. So for those of you who maybe are not familiar with what it is, you already got a little bit of a taste of the tool itself. So this has been spoiled already a little bit. I think actually we are coming up to the 1-year anniversary of this little independent film winning an Oscar. And part of the story that comes with it was that it was indeed made pretty much entirely with Blender. And here you can actually see what the software looks like. And this is, you know, if you're not familiar with how computer graphics looks like nowadays, this is an example. And this is what enabled a very small team of people to be able to put together something as complex and long as a feature film. So you have a viewport where you put together your 3D scene, and then you're free to move around your cameras and capture your shots, almost if you're filming this live. And this is another example of working on a set and being able to interactively tweak and design your scenes to achieve your desired cinematic effect. Ultimately, it's all about story, of course, though, right? So that's, people like Flow not because of it was made in Blender, but because there is a cat in it. And it was so interesting to see how this really resonated with a wide audience all over the world. And as I was saying before, like, this is a little bit of an underdog story because it was like really 3 small teams from Latvia, France, and Belgium working together and being able to put this together. And in the end, indeed, like winning this Academy Award, which is this gold and shiny object that then puts everything into a different light. This is the laptop of the film director from Ginz that is working on his next project. And he posted this on social media a while ago, and I found that very interesting because this picture actually shows what Blender is about. It's about being able to take your whole digital world that you're building for telling your story, put it in your own device, unplug from the internet, go on a plane, and work on it. And that kind of freedom that tools like Blender gives you, that is very, very precious. Having a film like Flow winning such an award means probably that there have been many attempts before. And I just do want to highlight the fact that, indeed, Flow is not the first film made with Blender. Many, many more have been made. And it's not just about film, it's also TV series. And it's not just about media and entertainment. So I want to actually highlight some other aspects that Blender is used for, which is industrial design, game development, forensics, machine learning training, research, medical research, data visualization, archaeological reconstruction. Then I want to put one that is very big because I'm coming here for a couple of years now, and I noticed that there is a big interest in the automotive industry. So I just wanted to mention that Blender is heavily used in the design stages in the automotive industry, pretty much every company out there in the world. And because it is so accessible and so easy to use, that's why designers like to work with it. And Blender is really more than software. It's it's a community project, and it's coordinated by a foundation, and it's funded primarily by donations. So the core, of course, there is the software, which is thousands of people contribute to it, and millions of people use it. Blender is downloaded over 20 million times a year nowadays. The mission of the project is very simple. It's to get the best 3D computer graphics technology in the hands of people as free and open source software. How do we do that? And how do you do that successfully? So we'll try to answer this question with a few examples that I think will give you an idea. One of them is content-driven development. Use your software to do things. So in the Blender project, there is a creative unit called Blender Studio that for over 20 years now has been working on short films to create content that pushes the technology to get better. Especially in the early days, I'm talking like the early 2000s, this was so important. It was inspired by what big film studios out there make. You create technology to tell new stories or to achieve something visually that was not possible before. And that is like the true way of building software that then is actually useful. Sharing is very important too, of course. Sharing is caring, and it's about creating a decentralized environment where everybody is free and everybody has the space to create their own community. It has always been part of Blender's strategy to have this kind of federated approach. Since the very beginning, you don't have one forum where you find all the answers. You can have like 10 forums because people have different interests. And being open and supportive of that vision is very important. Focusing on the community and focusing on getting people involved, that is also really, really important. Because what do artists need? You have to really go and ask and find out. And also, you have to make it possible for people who want to contribute to actually be able to do that and to get involved. This chart is shows something that is possible because of this. It's the response time that you get in the issue tracker of Blender when you report a bug, when there is a problem. So basically, in yellow, you can see the time that it takes to get a response. And we don't want to get too technical here, but basically, I read it for you. The halfway point is 1 day. It means that in 1 day, over 90% of the issues get a response. So, speaking of like one of the needs that a lot of companies have, saying, hey, I need to buy proprietary software because that way I'm going to get my phone support and my bugs fixed quickly. I always encourage people to check out this kind of chart because it actually shows how quick and how accurate the response can be, because the line in red shows how the issue gets fixed. And you can see that within 1 week, more than half of the issues get actually closed. So it is pretty impressive, and it's possible because of the scale of the community and being able to involve people to participate and fix those things. Communication, I just want to say a couple of words about that. Being clear, being honest, being transparent about the plans that you have, and also be honest when they don't work out. Being able to share that is very important. Work on a public infrastructure. That's something that Blender has always done since the very beginning. Self-hosting, self-managing. It comes at a cost, but then it really gives you the freedom and the ownership of what you are working on and what you are building, and you are not limited in any way, except your own resources, of course. A few final words. We are getting to the end. Everybody likes free, right? So how then do we make Blender possible? So it's really a lot about getting people to support, giving them the incentive, giving them the motivation. And nowadays, Blender is supported by quite a big community. There are like, these are a couple of numbers that I threw together, like 9,000 one-time donations a month, 250,000 plus of recurring donations, plus the one-times, thousands of individuals, and many corporations. So all these people, they are the ones that make Blender possible. And just to highlight a couple of companies, you may recognize some of these brands. And the reason why I'm putting them out there is also because then you can get a sense of where these organizations are based and where do they come from. And it's like pretty diverse. So having relationships with businesses is very important, but also making sure that they are involved in a way that is aligned with the vision of the project and not that they can take control over it. Blender, and actually I wrote this thinking about Blender. Okay, Blender was built and raised in Europe, but it's also a citizen of the world. Then I realized it's also a little bit the same for me. I grew up in Europe, and I absorbed a lot of the values. I was very fortunate to be here, but then I went out there. And that's also what is happening with Blender, and that was also very important for open source, to go beyond borders. And the guys before me already said it, so I don't want to repeat it, but I think it was really on point. Like software, and open source software especially, is this tool that allows us to find common grounds even when other things don't work. And it is something really special. And finally, I want to say that this is, of course, not about technology. It's about the people. And it's about people that are building a culture of sharing and sharing knowledge and sharing technology. So thank you very much. And now we can move on to our next segment, which is the presentation of the Prize for Excellence in Open Source, which is presented by the European Open Source Academy President, Daniel Stenberg.
So yeah, I'm here to say the same words again in another order. So, as was just said, open source has no real country borders, but in Europe we pride ourselves for having a large amount of excellent open source contributors and expertise. The European Open Source Academy was created to acknowledge and celebrate open source excellence in Europe. Citizens and residents of Europe run and populate many of the world's most well-used and most well-run projects. Open source provides foundations that power modern digital infrastructure, which our society and economy runs on. I run the car project, whose software runs in actually nearly everything that is internet connected. So I and you all, and we all know that it's not that hard to consider the scope of this, that we're doing here, what we're doing here as open source contributors. The prize for excellence in open source is designed to recognize people who play leading roles in open source, innovation, and steward projects that have transformational impacts and scale. Tonight's grand prize winner, our first true laureate of the prize for excellence in open source, embodies this reality. This is a person who has demonstrated excellence beyond measure in building open source infrastructure and whose leadership in the open source ecosystem has been invaluable for a future generation of contributors and advocates. I'm happy to introduce you all to this year's laureate with a little video.
Open source is the effort of many hands and minds. And tonight, we celebrate one in particular. The one who ensured weekly stable kernel releases, supporting billions of devices. The prize for excellence in open source goes to...
Greg authored more than 7,500 patches. He applied 105,000 commits to the kernel. He maintains and co-maintains 18 different areas of the kernel. And these numbers do not tell the whole story. Greg Cage's contributions to Linux kernel, community, and open source impact people's lives all over the world as they use Linux in their daily lives. Greg is a mentor and role model for me and many others in the kernel community.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jim Zemlin. I'm the CEO of the Linux Foundation, and I guess that technically makes me Greg's boss, but as Greg knows, and almost everybody who works at the Linux Foundation, Greg is much more of a peer and a good friend to everybody who works here. And I would argue that Linux is not just the most important open source project, Linux is the most important software in the world right now. Today, Linux runs the vast majority of the world's computing systems. In short, Linux is the most consequential technology and a fundamental building block for any modern technology product or service. And so, in that context, how important is Greg? Greg has been a tireless leader in helping bridge both the organic innovation that happens in the kernel and the practical application of that technology in building products and services that all of us depend on every single day. But when I talk to Greg, the thing that animates him more than anything, the thing that he wants to talk about more than anything, at least with me, isn't kernel code, isn't how to improve business interaction with open source, it's about his family. And that, I think, is one of the most important things. And so congratulations, Greg. You deserve this award, and I hope to continue to work with you, as you know, for many, many years to come.
Congratulations, Dad. We're so happy for you. I didn't realize how much of an impact you had on this industry until I started my degree in computer science, and my professor gave me a coding sheet that was written by you 2 years before I was born. I'm really happy to be your son, and I get to brag about you to all my friends, and this award just proves that there's even more to brag about. You've really done so much to help the community, for the open source people, and just Linux in general, and I'm so happy, and we're so proud to be your children. Congratulations.
Hi, Dad. Congratulations on getting this award this year. We are so proud of you. Of course, you are every year our top open source programmer in our household, but it's so nice to see you being recognized by the wider community. I may not have always understood what you do for work. I know as a small child, I would tell my classmates that you check your email in your pajamas. And I have to be honest, now when I talk to my colleagues, it is summed up pretty much by saying you check your email. But I've seen you through many conferences, many work events, and I've seen how much love and support you have for the open source community and how much this means to you. So we are so proud of you, and enjoy tonight.
For years of dedication to keeping open source reliable, secure, and thriving. Open source is the effort of many hands and minds. And tonight, we celebrate
There are tens of millions of open source projects in the world, and there are actually millions of open source maintainers. So many more would even count themselves as at least occasional open source contributors. These are sort of the quiet builders of Europe's digital world. So when we work in open source projects, we spend most of our sort of waking hours deep down in the weeds of code and build systems and discussing solutions and, tearing our hair out because we can't figure out why things don't work the way they should do, right? And open source projects can work a little bit like worlds on their own. You live there, you work there, you debate with the other humans that similarly spend their time in that particular project of yours, right? You may not notice the world outside, think or even care much about the other projects that similarly have their set of dedicated people involved, and you know, that's how it works, and that is totally fine. So working deep in the trenches this way makes you focus on your world and maybe remain unaware and oblivious of champions in other projects, the heroes that actually make things work in areas that need to work for our lives and to operate as smoothly as they, quite frankly, usually do. Greg Croa-Hartman here, however, he's our laureate of our first real prize for excellence in open source. He's a person whose work actually does get noticed across projects. So our recognition of Greg honors his leading work on the Linux kernel and in the Linux community, particularly through his work in the stable branch of Linux. Greg serves as a stable, as you heard here, kernel maintainer, so I'm repeating myself. But his work continues then to affect, contribute, and protect billions and billions of devices worldwide. So it's really impossible to overstate the importance of the work Greg has done on Linux. In software, innovation often grabs the headlines, but stability saves lives and livelihoods. Every Android phone, every web server, every critical system running Linux depends on Greg's meticulous work. He ensures that when hospitals, banks, governments, individuals rely on Linux, it doesn't fail them. His work represents the highest form of service, unglamorous, relentless, and absolutely essential. Without maintainers like Greg, the digital infrastructure in our world would crumble. He is quite literally one of the people keeping the digital infrastructure we all depend on running. As a fellow open source maintainer, Greg and I have worked together in the open source security context. Through my interactions with him and people who know him, I learned a few things about this guy. And now you want to know, right? Okay, so I can see you fall asleep. But Greg, he's a competent, he's a custodian and maintainer of many parts of subsystems in the Linux kernel. Actually, too many to even list, because 18. He has a voice. He doesn't bow to pressure or take the easy way out. He has integrity, and it's amusing to work with him in that way. Greg is persistent. He has been around and done hard work for the community for decades. He's a leader. He shares knowledge, spreads the word, talks to crowds in a way that is heard and appreciated. A mentor. An American by origin, Greg now calls Europe his home, having lived in the Netherlands for many years. While over here, he has taken on an important leadership role in safeguarding and advocating for the interests of the open source community. That is most evident through his work in the Cyber Resilience Act, through which he has educated and interacted with countless open source contributors and advocates whose work is affected by this legislation. We, if I may be so bold, the open source community in Europe, and yeah, the whole world, because boundaries, right? We appreciate your work and your excellence. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, as I'm the person between you and champagne, I'll be very quick. I would like to greatly thank the European Open Source Academy for this award. I'm very honored for this. I'm very honored that the work that I've done for Linux and the open source community for so long has been recognized by my peers, and it's been proven to be helpful to the success of Linux and open source overall. The European Union has, over the past years, recognized that open source software is what powers the world and frees everyone from forced reliance on commercial offerings, allowing all governments, companies, and people to control their own future. I'm proud to be a very small part of that effort and look forward to continue working together on this with all of you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Greg. So everyone, we now are nearing the end of tonight's ceremony, and I just want to thank all the people who've been involved in making this evening such a success and so much fun. And in particular, I want to thank Nicholas Gates and the teams at Open Forum Europe, the Research Institutes of Sweden, and Trust IT. Big applause for them, please. And now I'll hand off to Nicholas from OFE, who will give a few final remarks. Thanks again. Here comes Nicholas.
Please give it up for James Cantor, our excellent moderator for the evening. So my name is Nick Gates. I'm a senior policy advisor at OFE. I've been very involved in the planning of the ceremony, and we hope that you all enjoyed it. I wanted to really take a moment to recognize all of the hard work that goes into an event like this. So what you see is the Academy, but what is supporting the Academy is this EU-funded project that's helping to pioneer the engine that leads the Academy towards success. And so we're hoping that in a few years, we won't need this project, but it exists here to support these members and put on fabulous events like this. So a big round of applause to all of the teams that made this possible, including the teams at RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden, Open Forum Europe, Trust IT, and many, many others who are involved in this project. Please give it up for them, because their tireless work is worthy of being recognized. So one last tradition that we need to engage in is the donation of a book. So traditionally, when you come and you attend an event like this here at the Bibliothèque Solvay, you leave a book behind. What we've decided to leave behind is a book called Working in Public, The Making and Maintenance of Open Source Software by Nadia Eghbal. My story with open source is that I came through international development. I didn't know much about it, and I was interested in technology for service delivery. This was the first book that I read that I felt like I really began to understand open source software and its implications for the world, and also the dynamics powering the ecosystems that drive it. So we're going to donate this to the library over here on the left, and I want to, just take a moment to bask in this great tradition of the Bibliothèque Solvay. Thank you very much. So a few last housekeeping remarks, and then we can unleash you all on drinks. So we will be submitting a survey to you all via email where you can share your feedback about this event so that we can improve the ceremony for next year. That'll be sent tomorrow, and we're also aiming to make the recording of this ceremony available early next week, so please make sure to share that on social media. On that topic, we also want you to post about the awards tonight to get out the word about open source excellence and all that you learned here this evening. So please don't forget to take photos, or if you have taken photos already, share them online with the hashtag EOSAwards26. We're going to do a few things now, and then I'll unleash you to go outside. What's going to happen here is that we're going to turn over this room pretty rapidly so that you all can have dinner around 8:30. But what we're going to do first is an audience photo. So I'm going to ask you all to, under the glare of the spotlights, just like myself, stand up, turn around, and look at the balcony to the back so that we can get a photo for posterity. So, as you're making your way out, please go upstairs to the mezzanine while we prepare for dinner in here. I would ask that the awardees and the speakers remain inside, as we'll do a few last ceremonial activities with them. But I want to thank you all for your attendance, and I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your evening. Thank you all.